Welcome to the FSU Digital Fabrication Lab. This short video will serve as a basic tutorial for operating the Trotec Speedy 400 machine. We'll go through file setup and machine operation and some basic safety and operational principles. First things to consider, there is an exhaust system in the room, so this switch as well as the booster switch specifically for this machine need to be turned on, and those should be audible and obvious. To turn the machine itself on, you turn this black key right here. It will click, a light in the back will turn on, and the bed will drop down. As the bed is dropping down, I tend to then shift over to the computer to start my file setup. When setting up your document in Adobe Illustrator, there's a few things to consider. First, you might want to measure the size of the material that you're going to be cutting or engraving on, and set up the size of your artboard according to that. You're going to want to be in inches, centimeters, or millimeters, perhaps, depending on your preference, but it needs to be something that corresponds to a physical measurement. You also want to make sure that you're in RGB color mode, because this is the way the machine reads our vector lines as code. So I'm just going to set up a basic 12 by 8 inch document in RGB color mode. When you're making vector lines that you want to be coded as cut lines, you want to ensure that you're in RGB once again, and that the color code for R is 255 and 0 for the G and the B. This is also FF 0000 for the hex code if you prefer that. Then once that's set, make sure that the stroke width is 0.001, and this is about what you should see, almost sort of invisible little line that the machine will then read as a cut code. As far as engraving goes, any raster image will do. I prefer to set them into grayscale, which you can do if you have your image loaded in. Object, rasterize, and then there's a setting to make that grayscale. And the machine will then change the intensity of the laser based on how dark or how light the gradient of pixels on that image is. Once you are ready and your file is set up properly, you go to File, Print, or Control P. And we want to make sure that we're using the Trotec engraver for the printer driver here, and that our artboard is properly set to correspond to the machine. We hit Print, and Trotec's job control software should pop up. And the first thing we want to do here is click the USB icon to connect the machine. Once you've clicked that small USB icon there in the bottom right, that will change to a play button. We will also see this cursor here that corresponds to the location of the tool head on the actual physical bed of the machine. And when that tool head position is moved, this cursor will also move. We also have this readout here in inches of the size of the work plate for the machine itself. Next, we'll want to position our job onto the work surface here. So we can take, it should be the most recent file that was created. Just drag that anywhere onto the work plate, and I typically like to snap it to my tool head position just so that I have a good reference point. From there, we're going to want to set our material settings. They're down here in these two material drop-down menus. I'm going to be using a paper material, so I'll select paper, and then it's tag board technically, but the cardboard setting will do just fine. Other things to consider, we want to know the thickness of our material. To get that, we can take our digital calipers here, which are available in the lab, make sure we're at a 0 reading, and pull those apart. Squeeze them onto our material, and we're getting about 0.05 inches. I tend to like to estimate just a bit over. So I might put in 0.075. We've got that set, and then the laser will automatically adjust some settings to ensure that we're going to properly cut through our material. From here, we'll want to continue setting up our machine. After you've turned it on, the bed will drop all the way down, and it will calibrate kind of the X, Y, and Z here to automatically move the bed all the way back up. We'll want to hold this shift key all the way to the right on our pad here, control pad, and push the up arrow. This will then slowly raise the bed, and a burst of air will be shooting out of the tool head, and once it detects that air, it will stop and give us a good ballpark for being in autofocus. Alright, once our bed has raised back up, now we're going to want to position our material and make sure that our design will correspond to the size of our material, and then we're not going to cut outside of the bounds of our material. To move the tool head, we can use this directional pad. See that the tool head will move as I move this. And the screen, the cursor on the screen will correspond to the motion of the tool head. We can now place our material on the bed. I tend to like to corner it up in the upper left, just so that we have a nice angle to work with. You might be working with an irregular shape, and that's just fine. You can place it anywhere on the bed, it doesn't matter. You'll also see this small red dot that will also help you in figuring out exactly where the tool path will be when you are eventually doing your cutting and engraving. From here, we're going to want to make sure that we have our tool head set at the right height away from our material. This is really important for engraving and getting a high resolution image. It's also going to be important for if the power settings will properly cut through your material. In order to properly focus, we'll use this small brass notch, and that should fit right into this groove on the tool head. Right now, we're just about perfectly in focus. You should feel a bit of friction on the top of your surface, and you should not be able to wiggle the key up and down too much. It's okay if it's not super tight in there, but it should be a relatively snug fit. From here, we want to make sure that our design is indeed going to only cut on the surface of the material. There's a couple ways to kind of do this. We can use that position and the corresponding cursor, snap our job to the location of the tool head, and then come back over to the directional pad and move the tool head and look at this screen and see if the edges of our design are beyond the borders of our material. My design is very small, so obviously you can see that the edge of my design is right about here. On the bottom, on the right, we're already past it. On the left, we're again already past it. So we know that all of our cut or engraving will be happening right about here, and that's just great. Additionally, here in the machine interface, we do have the option to set our power and velocity or speed settings manually. This is true for both the raster engraving settings here on the black and the red for the vector cut lines. The P corresponds to the percentage of power that is coming out with the laser, so we can put that to 90%, and the velocity is the speed of the tool head as it moves through the work. So we can maybe turn that up to 3. So now our head will be moving a little bit faster and putting out a little bit more of a percentage of power of that capacity that the laser has. It's also useful to note that if you're not able to cut through your material all the way, I suggest leaving it in the bed, don't touch it, don't move it, and just right-click your job and hit repeat cut lines. Also, if you are using a more complex design and you're not sure exactly where those cut lines are going to go and you would like to know that, you can hit this eyeball up here in the top, and then you will see a visual representation of the design of your work. From here, it's probably a good idea to just go through and review everything. Make sure that you have both the exhaust fans on, your machine is focused, the thickness of your material is entered into the machine, and that your job is properly positioned for your material. And if all of that looks good, we are probably good to print. If at any point in this process you get a bit lost, there is a checklist right here, and we do have a color code diagram right there, so those are some helpful resources. There should also be always a lab tech or myself in the lab to help you through this process. Alright, so then once everything's good to go and we're all set up, we can go ahead and hit the play button in the bottom right corner, and we should see our machine go to work. You want to give your material a second to vent off, particularly if you're using acrylic. But then we can go ahead and open up. Take our job away, we can see it cleanly cut through. And our engraving was nice and in focus and looks great.